proactive stance which presents solutions for us all. Tourism is inherently a positive undertaking. However, it necessitates an element of management and control when it starts to reach limits and also exceeds them. Limits can express themselves in various ways, ranging from sheer volume to noise, traffic, waste, damage, and annoyance, amongst others. They can also lead to pressures on infrastructure, causing difficulties for all sides of tourism equation, the destination, the facilities, the visitors, and the host communities. In my intervention during the high-level panel this morning, I will share the experiences that we have encountered and the solutions we have proposed and applied. The one important lesson we have learned from all of this is that there is no single universal solution to all the challenges that we face. Rather, we have studied each individual case and issue, consulted with the parties concerned, proposed solutions, refined them, and then rolled them out within the shortest time possible. There's nothing more disappointing when addressing an issue than to keep delaying responses time and time again. The interactive session this afternoon will further also expand the discussion by including experts from various backgrounds, including aviation, academia, accommodation, administration, trade, and public opinion. This conference can lay the ground for a more detailed discussion within the wider remit of UN tourism's organs and work programs, recognizing the need to balance tourism growth, people, and planet. Secretary General, Excellencies, dear friends, once again, I stress the need for international collaboration for the continued improvement of tourism. UN tourism provides us with the platform for discussions and decisions. We need to also think global and act local by identifying what unites us and respecting differences, reminding ourselves of the words of Mahatma Gandhi, our ability to reach unity in diversity will be the beauty and the test of our civilization. Together, we can drive tourism towards the future we want to. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, for your words. I now have the honor to inviting you to follow a video message which we have received from His Excellency Mr. Apostolos Tzitzikostas, who is the European Commissioner for Sustainable Transport and Tourism, whose perspective will further enrich our reflections on the future of tourism in Europe. Over.
Dear Secretary General Alno Weiss, my good friend Shaikha, Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure for me to address you today. I only wish I could do so in person. Now, some would have you believe that we should forget about tourism in 2026, that concerns about jet fuel, airspace closures, and geopolitical instability will put people off travel. I disagree. The data we have for 2026 show that people are likely to choose their destination carefully rather than refrain from travel altogether. And we heard the same pessimism after the pandemic, saying that people would travel less as costs rose, but time proved them wrong. This does not mean, of course, that we are not cautious of the difficulties that the current instability is causing. And we are working hard every day to make sure that we have appropriate measures in place. What I would say is that in times of instability, Europe is always seen as a safe and stable destination. And tourism is one of Europe's greatest success stories. In 2025, we welcomed nearly 583 million international visitors, confirming once again our position as the world's leading tourism destination. It is true, however, that the sector is increasingly exposed to global shocks. And we have seen how quickly events far from Europe can disrupt travel flows, connectivity, and businesses, can push up travel costs and affect traveler confidence. And alongside politics, destinations have experienced a pandemic and extreme weather in recent years. So prevention is better than a cure. And that's why I want resilience to become a core pillar of tourism policy. At European level, we are taking concrete action, including preparations for a new European strategy for a resilient and competitive tourism sector. While working on this longer-term strategy, which we will present later this year, we are also working intensively to tackle any immediate impacts of the current crisis. In recent weeks, the Commission has intensified coordination with Member States and tourism stakeholders. This helps us to monitor impacts on connectivity and on travel flows and support information sharing. And prior to this latest crisis, we are working already towards a European tourism crisis coordination mechanism to reinforce preparedness, cooperation, and crisis response all across the tourism ecosystems in Europe. Together with the Member States, we are also working to preserve connectivity and support coordinated responses across transport and tourism systems during periods of disruptions. And of course, we continue investing in more sustainable and competitive tourism models. Next year's International Year of Sustainable and Resilient Tourism comes at exactly the right moment. It is a great opportunity to place tourism higher on the global political agenda, not only as an economic sector, but as a driver of resilience, of sustainability, and of international cooperation. Cooperation between regions will be, of course, essential. Across Europe, countries are increasingly working together on cross-border tourism routes, destination management, and joint promotion. This is how Europe will get smarter in destination management, strengthen the connectivity, and rebalance tourism flows from overcrowded hotspots towards lesser-known destinations all across our regions. As part of our long-term strategy, we are also strengthening international partnerships, including through tourism dialogues with Japan, Central Asia, and through our cooperation with the UN Tourism and the OECD. Because the challenges facing tourism today do not stop at borders. Ladies and gentlemen, tourism must continue to grow, but in a way that is more sustainable, more resilient, and more beneficial for our local communities. And the European Union stands ready to work with all of you to shape this future together. So thank you very much for your invitation, and I'm looking forward to this very good collaboration that we have with you.
Thank you, Mr. Tzitzikostas, for your address and for the thoughtful message and for sharing the European Commission's perspective on building a more sustainable, inclusive and resilient tourism industry in Europe. It is now my great honor to invite Her Excellency, our Secretary General, Her Excellency Ms. Sheikha Al Nuwais, to deliver her welcome remarks. This occasion is particularly significant as it marks her first visit to Malta since she took office, underscoring the importance of today's dialogue. Over to you.
Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very delighted to be here with you again. My apologies. We've been partying all night yesterday, so my voice is gone. Um, honestly, I'm very, really looking forward to visiting the Malta Film Studios later today. Malta has appeared on screens around the world for years. So it's exciting to finally see where some of those stories were brought to life. And in many ways, that reflects something bigger about this country. Malta understands how to share its story with the world, not just through tourism, but through culture, heritage, and creativity. This is a country that understands tourism not just as an industry, but as a responsibility to people, to communities, and to the planet. And Malta is showing the balance. That balance is possible. Last year, Malta welcomed close to 4 million international tourists, almost 50% above pre-pandemic levels. Now the focus is on what comes next. And that long-term thinking is exactly what our sector needs more of. It is also the spirit behind the Tea Forum, bringing together universities, government, and industry to turn ideas into practical solutions. Because tourism is navigating a period of profound change. Climate pressures, geopolitical uncertainty, a rapidly shifting jobs market, and the accelerating impact of AI. These challenges are connected, and they demand connected solutions. That is why the strong representation here today matters so much, and thank you all for being here. Because ultimately, the future of tourism will be shaped by the story we choose to tell together. A story not only about growth, but also about people, communities, and the future we want to leave behind. I hope you have a great time together today and you leave with great takeaways. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your very inspiring and visionary remarks and for the flattering comments about Malta. I look forward to joining you in the visit to the film studios. As you say, where a lot of stories which are told all over the world take shape. We now pass on to the next item on the agenda, which is the one-to-one with Professor Jafari, which our dear friend and regional director for Europe, Cordula, will manage and moderate. Professor Jafari, as Deputy Prime Minister Borch has described, is a great friend of Malta, and over the last couple of years we have worked very closely with him to establish Tea Forum in Malta, but I'll let him and Cordula tell us all about it. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a good night rest, and it's a pleasure being here with you. And it's a particular pleasure and a big honor for me, Professor Jafar Jafari, to have this one-to-one debate with you now on stage. I'm pleased because we are very famous in tourism research. You are one of the most influential, or probably the most influential voice in tourism research. You have made possible over the last decades that we have even a field of tourism research. And you have also created the Tourism Annals, and you are the editor of the Encyclopedia of Tourism. You have built platforms like the T-Forum, about which we will briefly speak now also. But I want to begin with a confession to you. Some years ago, Professor Jafari, I have heard you speaking at a panel like this here, and you said something what stayed with me ever since. Tourism is not marketing, is not management, is not economics, is not psychology, not geography, not anthropology. It's all of this and much more. And I must confess that I'm using this quite often also in my speaking engagements. Now, this is so beautifully said because it captures our sector, how cross-sectorial, multidisciplinary it is. It is so much, it is so diverse. And here we start the discussion, Professor Jafari. Does this mean that we here in the room doing tourism on a daily basis, that we need to understand all these disciplines? And looking at the topic of today, balanced tourism, do we also need to understand urban planning, spatial planning, this kind of aspects? And for tourism policy makers that we are having in the room, tourism policy not to treat in this narrow sense anymore as a narrow sectoral issue that touches now on so many items. The first question, I know that the T-Forum has some answers to this, what I'm asking here. And we are doing this together with the T-Forum. Can you explain us this T-Forum, the idea behind it, and how you created it many years ago with my predecessor, the former regional director for Europe, Professor Dr. Eduardo Fayos Sola, whom we miss very much, how it started and what it is about?
Well, thank you very much for this lovely introduction. I'm also very happy to be in Malta. Yeah, to be in Malta, beautiful country on a beautiful day, coming together to discuss a subject that we all love, and the name of that subject or industry is tourism. The creation of the T-Forum is the result of the history of tourism. Tourism was not welcomed on university campuses until beginning of the 20th century. All other fields were there, but not tourism, because it hadn't, in the mind of universities, it hadn't earned the dignity that it deserves. In the case of the United States, we didn't have tourism until tourism at universities until 1922, when Cornell University opened its doors to hotel management. And there was a long silence, and the first tourism course ever in the United States was offered at the end of 1960s. And then suddenly universities began to open their doors to tourism studies, offering bachelor's, then master's, PhD, and now postdoc. It's amazing how far we have gone. But the problem is, in order to legitimize ourselves on the campuses, we stopped with the theory of tourism. We did not land it in the land of practice. So the industry is not really benefiting from what we are putting together. Just to give you a sense, at the beginning of 1970, we had only 3 journals in the world in tourism, only 3. Guess how many journals, academic journals, in hospitality and tourism we have today? If you said 100, it's not enough. 350 journals are publishing quarterly articles on tourism. And the problem, Cordula, is that these articles are highly theoretical, worded in 10 pages, 10,000 words. The industry doesn't have the time to read such a long piece, and the language is very thick. It needs to be decoded. So that was the idea that we decided that we need to have something in between that encourages to bring the industry and the academic community and the government together, and T-Forum was born. The idea for that surfaced in 2013 in Mallorca, Spain. Then we celebrated our first international conference of T-Forum in Naples, Italy, 2015, 2018 in Palma de Mallorca, Spain, 2020 in Algarve, Portugal, and then COVID came. Both tourism, industry, and T-Forum went to bed, more or less, slept for a long time. Now we are back. We are back, and T-Forum has moved its office from Italy to Malta with the intent of bridging tourism theory and practice. And I'm sure you have received, everybody has received our first magazine. I call it magazine, not journal, because journal implies research. And the articles of 10,000 are now reduced to 400 words. And a very busy executive can read it in 3 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you so much for explaining this. Welcome to Malta with the T-Forum. I understand that Malta is hosting you. You have professors working on particular issues and items where you extract knowledge from these research papers in certain areas, and you translate those in short sentences so that the policymakers can familiarize themselves with those findings from these thousands of research papers that are produced every year. I think it's an amazing work, Professor Jafari. Congratulations on that. Talking about balanced tourism or balanced growth in tourism, it's a very timely topic also here in Malta with 600,000 inhabitants, 4 million international tourist arrivals. There is no official definition of this balanced tourism. I have looked in your encyclopedia. There's a lot of over-tourism, several pages even explained. But when I looked now for balanced tourism, there was nothing in there. So there is no concept description as such. How would you, as the expert, define it? In what ways does it differ also from sustainable tourism, from this concept? How do you see that?
Well, balanced tourism is in the eyes of the beholder. It's very difficult to define it. I am, by training, I'm anthropologist, cultural anthropologist. So I can answer it from that point of view. To me, people matter, culture matters. Balanced tourism is when the host community is satisfied with the pressure of tourism. When it goes beyond the tolerance of the local community, the problem begins, over-tourism begins. I know we don't want to use the terminology over-tourism, but over-tourism is the cause of this bad chemistry which happens between host and guest. And we have seen already countries rising against overcrowded destinations. So it's all about capacity building. I don't use myself the word over-tourism. I use under-capacity development or over-capacity development. And capacity has the physical nature, infrastructure, superstructure, and nature, the way it's being taxed, and also the chemistry between host and guest. And this has to be monitored annually. The problem in tourism research is we measure it now, and we are satisfied with the measurement. But measure the same thing next year, it has changed. Measure it another year, it has changed. The relationship between host and guest, or tourist satisfaction. So in tourism, we need to have longitudinal studies so we can see the shifts in the sentiment of the host population. Just at this point, to me, happiness and well-being of the host community is the most important thing. It reminds me of Bhutan that came up with the concept of gross national happiness. And some years later, I think 2015, 16 or something like that, United Arab Emirates came up with the idea of a Ministry of Wellness and Happiness. These are wonderful developments. This is what tourism is all about, to make the well-being and happiness, increase the happiness of the local community, host community.
Thank you, Professor Jafari, for that. I think that has a lot with our work in UN Tourism to do, where this monitoring and measurement of tourism, also through the observatories, where Malta was yesterday also recognized as a new member in this network that we are having. Thank you for that explanations. One final question before we are ending. What would be the one message you would most like policymakers and tourism leaders to take away from the discussion today? And what kind of call of action you would like to give them?
Well, thank you for this. Oh, I have. Yeah. Thank you very much for this question. Again, the idea, the plan is to bring the host community and the guests together, establish a relationship, and get involvement with the industry, academic community, and government into one thing. T-Forum has the concept of local action committee. So we would help the interested countries to set up this committee, the structure, to monitor tourism development in their respective countries. This is basically what my takeaway is the last slide here that we are looking at.
We lost it.
It's coming back. But they saw it. Here we go. This is my takeaway, which I have written some articles about this. Take it, use it. It really captures the moment of tourism, the balanced tourism that we want, and the happiness that we want to create, and the well-being that would be coming through tourism. That is my takeaway. I hope you take it and use it in your respective countries.
Thank you, Professor Jafari, for your insights, for your knowledge, for sharing it with us today. And with this, I think we have set the scene for the discussions to follow. Thank you so much, and enjoy the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jafari, and thank you, Cordula. I'll share a very tiny anecdote from my personal experience. I take you back to 1st February 1983, my first day at work within the research department of the National Tourism Organization in Malta. Tiny office with a small bookshelf on which there were two sets of books. One set was UN tourism publications. The other set was Annals of Tourism Research by Professor Jafari. 43 years later, we have them here in Malta, sitting in the same panel and addressing us. So a dream come true. When one waits, one gets satisfaction. I know we're in a rush, so we will now pass on to the high-level panel, because we have to talk about the governance challenge on the issue of driving tourism towards the future we want. And I would like to invite our panelists and moderator, Sandra, to join us on stage so that we go into the next phase of this morning's session, which is this high-level panel, which will tackle the discussion from the governance perspective. So please join us. And I am happy to call Dr. Ian Borch, Ms. Simonida Kordic, Mr. Abdulaziz Akulov, Mr. Daniel Attart, and Mr. Eduardo Santander. Thank you.
So, very good morning. Good morning. Good. I saw a lot of you in the dance floor last night, so I do understand the challenges of this morning. But I think we are here to enjoy a good discussion and a good learning. As Deputy Prime Minister said in the beginning, there's no one solution fits all, and we are here to share solutions and to learn from each other. I would like to start by just reflecting on the conversation that we just heard. And when we think about well-being of the communities as our most important KPI, then I would start with our host. What is the policies that actually can shape that future we want, where the community well-being is our key KPI? And what would be the critical elements of those policies? Because we talk about policies to drive this change. What would be that framework that we need to put in place?
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Thank you also for my colleagues, panelists, and everyone joining us this morning. I think having such a question and a challenge already indicates that that there is a strong and robust tourism industry in a place where we are discussing the effects of it, and I think we have to first acknowledge that the fact that Malta, for example, last year registered over 4 million visitors, and that means around 8 times its population. Hence why we start discussing on a daily or weekly basis the effect of tourism on the respective communities. This was not discussed as much 10, 15, 20 years ago because, of course, the number of residents and activity on a daily basis outnumbered the visitors amongst us. It also means that there's a whole economic ecosystem that was built around this sector. So many people invested heavily, and everything is relative in life. So a multinational company that invested in a hotel or in an experience in Malta made X amount of investment, but also that young couple that decided to buy a second property and rent it out to visitors. So when we speak about investments, we have to nowadays also acknowledge the democratization of tourism. As Professor Javari ended up his interview, his statements, I think people are not going to enjoy a destination where the community is not happy. And therefore, it is important to work on a daily basis towards facilitating, enhancing the population's sentiment. And therefore, I would answer your question by saying that every policy and decision should be resident-centric. It doesn't mean that residents or tourism operators are always right. And then it's up to good politicians, authorities, decision makers to take everything into consideration and then take a final decision. But of course, we have to take into consideration the nuances on our communities, the pressure on the housing affordability, on traffic, and also how the locality looks like with all this activity going on. We have various examples. I think we're going to tackle that later, how we are trying to manage and strike a balance, but keeping the locals at the center of every decision taken is crucial, in my opinion, for addressing the well-being of both communities, but also those visiting.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. Also, I think it's important because for the first time, communities are actually part of the stakeholders, which was not in the past. And as you say, there is different views, and then there's also a policy decision in what is the bigger good for the community. Minister, in Montenegro, how are you tackling also this approach? Because it's very much up to, I think a few years ago, tourism policy was more of, as it was mentioned before, not so much the long-term perspective, but how do we use policy to actually build this long-term vision?
The tourism has changed quite dramatically in past, say, 2 decades. So the policies need to change as well if we want them to be successful and purposeful. The thing with the modern tourism is that the purpose of the tourism, the actors involved, the intensity of it has completely shifted from the period when it was perceived mostly as a industry of luxury, not a necessity, rather a place or a activity that you would dedicate your surplus budget to. However, the new world has brought the new practices and new necessities. More and more, tourism is actually becoming a necessity and a important item in our personal agendas and our personal budgets when we act as tourists. And the management of this industry and the policies have to reflect that. The need of the modern man that lives in this neoliberal, mostly neoliberal Western world, where workload is intense and overwhelming, really, really needs a reset. So in a strange shift of faith, the standard practices of socialism in the 20th century, where workers were provided with the place to stay, the place to visit, to have holidays in, have now become incorporated in the very much private sector, private investment and capitalist, quote-unquote, model of economy. This is why we have to regard tourism as one of the systematic industries in each country, and we need to create policies that reflect the needs of these new age tourists. I will mention 2. One is the fact that, as Professor has mentioned, and that's a very good point, that a nice place to live is a nice place to visit, and vice versa, we need to encourage more balanced development of our country's tourism and regional tourism as well, by investing in those places and services that provide authentic experience and that provide at least 10 days or 15 days of a relaxed and nice way of life. This is how you reset. You change your life and you walk into somebody else's shoes. What we have done in Montenegro, which was typically very much a beach tourism-oriented country, completely disregarding the vast capacities, inland capacities, beautiful villages, beautiful nature, excellent food, may I add, and an authentic way of life. So we have supported local communities, and in 5 years, we have more than quadrupled the number of the registered households, registered for tourism, and I'm talking about village or agricultural households. So from about 56 registered in 2019, we now have 368. So, and that the policies actually bring new value to the rural areas. They give them an opportunity to participate in a new industry, to actually export their products and their services, and gain financial stability. The other policy is regional cooperation. Again, we are noticing that tourists are no longer staying in one place. They want to see as much as they can. They do not plan their vacations within the borders of the countries. They actually would rather see many countries in one go. So we have started a project, and I'm glad that it has found its way into the projects of UN Tourism. It was started between the southeastern European countries, involving Montenegro, Italy, Greece, Bulgaria, North Macedonia, Albania, Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Serbia. I think I mentioned them all, whereby we are actually packaging ourselves as one tourist region and marketing the touristic potentials of this region towards long-haul markets. Individually, none of these countries is spacious enough or strong enough to meet the needs of long-haul tourists, but together we are just the ticket. So at least these two policies are actually reflecting the way in which we cater to what is tourism today rather than what it used to be.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister, and particularly on the policy to incentivize underserved areas to actually be part of the tourism value chain. And that brings me to Mr. Ukolov as well. Welcome, Chairman of the Tourism Committee of Uzbekistan. How do we translate these policies into real benefits then to the communities?
Thank you, Sandra. Political measures ensure that socio-economic growth brings tangible benefits only when economic development is directly linked to job creation, infrastructure, and the improvement of service at the local level. A primary example of this approach is transformation of tourism in Uzbekistan. Since launching our reforms in 2017, international arrivals have grown from 2.7 million to 11.7 million in 2025, with tourism now contributing nearly 3.5% to our GDP and 4.8 billion USD in service exports. However, the real success lies in how these figures transform everyday lives. By expanding beyond traditional hubs like Samarkand, Bukhara, and Khiva, our policies have successfully decentralized tourism. This shift stimulates small businesses and raises household incomes by creating constant demand for local hospitality, transport, and handicrafts. The impact is most visible in our rural areas. For example, the village of Sentop, recognized by UN Tourism as one of the best tourism villages in 2023, have seen a flourishing ecosystem of family-run guest house. Similarly, in the Jizak and Kashkadarya region, ecotourism investments have provided high-income opportunities in areas formerly dependent on agriculture.
Thank you. Thank you very much for bringing, as the Minister of Montenegro, the importance of really spreading tourism. But I think we started also the discussion with how do we address, Deputy Prime Minister mentioned it, how do we address the challenges that we know exist in destinations where the carrying capacity, either physical or social, as Professor Jafari mentioned, are being challenged. And I want to go to Mr. Attar, a member of European Parliament and Tourism and Transport Committee, because particularly now, as the Parliament is taking a strong report on the subject, and Europe is so diverse, as we see. What are the challenges, and how do we address the challenges of managing flows in destinations where the capacity is being regarded as already either in limit or beyond, but at the same time ensure that dispersal? Mr. Attar.
First of all, thank you. Thank you for hosting this important conference. As you rightly set out, the European Parliament has just concluded our report, our position. I was the rapporteur in charge of the Parliament's position for sustainable tourism. My report was backed strongly in the European Parliament by a very strong majority from across the political spectrum. And now the ball is in the European Commission's court, in Apostolos Tsiktsikosta's court, to come up with Europe's first sustainable tourism strategy. And rest assured that I'm engaging directly with the Commissioner to ensure that the Commission heeds the Parliament's position, because this is no longer my opinion, it's the Parliament's position. And in my report, I set out immediately, I set the record straight, because many times when we're discussing tourism and how to right the wrongs, we tend to look at tourism from a negative perspective. And my position is clear. I mean, tourism is the solution. A strong tourism destination is also a strong economy. Without our strong tourism numbers, we would not have been able in this country to lower our debt from 74% to below 50%. Our deficit is at 2%. We will have a surplus in 3 years' time. We are increasing our pensions. We have free childcare, free public transport, free school transport, free exams. Nothing of this would have been possible without tourism. So let's set the record straight. Tourism is a very important and key driver for our economy, for our well-being, for our livelihoods, for our people. That is the first point. And then we have to address, the Secretary General of UN Tourism said, connected problems. I see them as common problems which require also common solutions at the European level. And through the report which we have just concluded, I put tourism at the center of European competence, because many times, as the professor was saying, tourism had no place in universities. And until recently, actually, tourism had no place in the European Union. It was seen as secondary. It was seen as something which the European Union does not have competence on. But that's wrong, because tourism is affected, and it affects, so it's mutual, key elements on which the European Union has competence: infrastructure, transport, waste management, energy, environment. So these are the elements which we address in the report which we have put forward to the Commission. We want, for example, to move beyond words to action, to put the money where our mouth is. So when it comes to connectivity, the European Parliament has just voted to recognize connectivity as an essential service. Like water is, like energy is, we need to invest in connectivity. Why? Because, first of all, I do not subscribe to the idea of over-tourism. If you look at the numbers, 80% of tourism in Europe is intra-European mobility. We do not have enough international visitors. It's just 20%. So we need more international visitors. And when it comes to Europe itself, we have hotspots. We do not have over-tourism, we have hotspots. We need to spread tourism. How do you spread tourism? Not by speaking about spreading tourism. You need to create the routes. People can only go where they have the means to go. So we need to put the money where our mouth is. We need to invest more in connectivity. Where rail is not possible, we need to help countries like Malta and other island destinations to invest in ferries, in clean ferries. We need also the European Union to be more flexible when it comes to public service obligations, for example. If we want to explore new routes, and I can be blunt here, Ryanair, Jet2, EasyJet will not go to new routes. They will only go to the hotspots, because the only thing that matters is filling up their seats. And one can understand it's a business operation. But when it comes to destination management, we need to explore new routes. So we need to have more flexible rules at the European level, and this is a European competence, when it comes to state aid, when it comes to PSOs. And this will also then help citizens, as the professor was rightly saying. Because, for example, when it comes to European regional airlines, they serve the people as much as they serve tourists. They serve a medical purpose, we know very well, because, for example, our airline flies our people to the UK for important medical treatment, but it also brings tourists in. So there we need more flexible rules. We need the European Union to be more strong from an environmental perspective on single-use plastics, for example, because they are still prevalent in the tourism industry. Short-term rentals, another key element in our report. We do not want to eradicate short-term rentals. We know that short-term rentals have led to important regeneration projects in different parts of our island, which were important. I mean, these parts were abandoned, not seen before, and it led to better, authentic experiences for our tourists. But as a European Parliament, we want to act as enablers, not regulators. We want to enable local councils, regional councils, state governments to regulate as much as they want to. And we have to support them by providing legal clarity. So these are aspects of our elements, because I know we're pressed for time, and I will conclude my intervention here, but I remain available to engage with all of you in the weeks and months ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for opening so important issues, in particular the coordination with other areas of government. I think the discussion was mentioned before. It's probably one of the most cross-cutting sectors. Eduardo, from the European Travel Commission, how do you see this progressing? How do we make tourism sit on the table with other areas, connectivity, transport, competitiveness, regulation? How does this happen?
Thank you. Thank you, Sandra, and bonjour. It's amazing to be in Malta again, and there's no better place to talk about tourism and the future of tourism, and this very particular place in the middle of the Mediterranean, but with a huge historical European background. I think you placed me on purpose in this panel because I'm the only non-political, non-partisan person, so I can talk a little bit freely, if I may. And by the way, all best of luck with the electoral period in Malta. I hope you do well, because you're doing already a great job here. Now, semantics matter a lot in tourism. And for the last, I say 15 years, you know, in every tourism conference, we have the word sustainability, right? But we never actually ask ourselves, what do we want to sustain? Do we want to sustain a margin, profit-driven industry with unlimited growth? Or, you know, we wanted to go for the alternative. You know, during the meeting yesterday, we talked about regeneration, you know, like it was heavily discussing. We want to not only extract, but invest. Now we're talking about balance and balance. Well, in every balance, you need a scale. And we know exactly what we have at one end of the scale, but we haven't decided yet what we want to put on the other side of the scale. And this is where we're coming with, you know, the new strategy, and, you know, having the Commission here in the room, and having heard what the Commission wanted to tell us today. I think we have elements there, you know, to put in the scale. First of all, is, and it has been mentioned already by some of the other panelists, is trying to bring people to lesser known destinations, okay? So off the beaten path. This is difficult, but it's doable. And we've seen it, you know, that it's happening in many places in Europe. And while hotspots, to Daniel's, you know, will be still visited and probably to a certain degree also overcrowded for some periods of times, you know, we need desperately, you know, to bring people to other places that are equally valuable to be visited. Second of all, is off-season. You know, 96% of all European tourism destinations suffer seasonality. That's all of them except in the big cities, all of them. So we have to do, and here I'm giving in Spanish we say the hot potato back to our policymakers and leaders, because we need to talk about things like school holidays happening at the same time. We need to talk about infrastructure that, you know, if we increase capacity in the air, as it's happening in Malta, we need to increase capacity also at ground transportation. You know, we were discussing traffic before in Malta. So, you know, you create, maybe you solve a problem in one place, but you have to see the value change of all that, you know, whole process. Third point is the involvement of local population. This is much easier said than done, okay? And because tourism is old in Europe particularly. Please don't forget that we are in a historical period. This is very defining us. There are three aspects that after the Second World War are actually made Europe what it is today. Trade, technology, and travel, the three T's, don't forget. And after this period of what I call also historical holiday, because after the Second World War, we have lived the best period in our lives. in the history of Europe, we need to come now with a more solution-driven tourism policy. And I think the strategy from the upcoming strategy is seeking into that solution-driven through the consultation, and it's not easy. Please, that strategy is gonna be like the Rosetta Stone of tourism, where you can translate everything, and it requires a lot of compromise, it requires readjustment, and it requires, of course, not only collaboration, but cooperation. There's a huge, again, semantics. Collaboration is not the same as cooperation. Cooperation is you operate together, you invest together, you put resources to. It's not only to put your logo and your willingness there. Now, from a destination point of view, representing ETC, and it is great that this sustainable strategy for tourism is upcoming, we also have to take into account the geopolitical context. Because what we say today, tomorrow is not valid. The polycrisis environment that we are living in these times, we have to have this kind of agility, we have to have flexibility, and among everything, we have to be willing to share knowledge, share best practices, and share solutions. This is where my appeal, and obviously with the highest respect to all your work, to our politicians and policymakers in the room, it's very important that we don't seek just for the next elections, but we seek for the next generation, because tourism is about generational heritage, that what kind of places do we like to live, not only now, but which places do we want to live there also for next generations and next travelers.
Thank you, Eduardo. And coming back, as you say, to the hot potato, and because we are quite stressed on time, and I know the Deputy Prime Minister will have to leave us as well. Specifically, and we were talking about seasonality, and also it's a very slow process to actually change seasonal patterns. It takes time, it takes investment, but also to disperse visitors to less known destinations. One specific measure here in Malta, and then also in Montenegro, that you think is something that can be also of inspiration to other destinations in the room?
Yes, well, this is quite a complex discussion, which takes place all the time at your family table, workplace, and everywhere else. And and I am part of government, so I think it's important that whatever we say, whatever we do, we take into consideration the whole picture. I don't want that we get disillusioned and believe that we can have a successful tourism industry without having the volumes and without having the numbers. We reached 4 million tourists. It means that someone out there is sustaining those visitors in terms of accommodation, not only the traditional hotels. It means transportation, restaurants, and all the other sectors. So ultimately, in my opinion, the objective is to manage better the space in terms of months of the year, time of the day, managing better also the physical space, which of course that is very limited in Malta. And it means that we have to work together, government, local councils, communities, NGOs, and the private sector. But thinking about getting 500,000 tourists that leave the same amount of money that 4 million tourists plus leaves in the whole economy of the country, I think it's and then we are an island state. So we cannot also expect to have 110 plus direct flights to 110 plus airports across the continent and across the world, and expecting them to carry us to enjoy different parts of Europe without carrying tourists with us when we are traveling outbound and when we are returning to our islands. And this cake, this baked cake, this economy, is giving us all those advantages that Daniel mentioned. This economy is leaving a substantial amount of wealth that is being distributed to our citizens. So you cannot have the cake and eat it, but we can manage the space. That's what we did with Blue Lagoon, with Comino Island, where we introduced last year a management system not to have more than 4,000 visitors at the same time in the same place. So scattering the visitors during a longer period of the day. We can discuss whether 4,000 is too much or not, but now we have the system in place, and now we can start other discussions. The same with the recent introduction of accommodation regulations. So we want growth, but not necessarily with the fast pace we grew in the past 10 years. But we still want to grow, always moving forward. So what sort of growth? What sort of accommodation we want on the market? And then the responsibilities. Working with different local councils. We've started a pilot project with Valletta and Sui, installation of noise monitors, because those enjoying our bars, our restaurants, need their space. I don't know where you were partying last night. I think I missed that one. I was campaigning. But of course, if you are partying where other residents are staying, and they have to wake up early in the morning to go out and work, to take their children to school, you have to respect as well. And also empowering more tourism, not police, but officers that of course are doing their best to have visitors behaving well in our communities. We had some more initiatives, but basically, I mean, the objective is to manage better the space and not to get carried away of this fairy tale that we can have a prosperous economy without having the numbers. I think that's not possible.
Thank you. I think that's a very important point. Back before the pandemic, we actually did a survey in more than 10 cities. And when asked what policies the residents would prefer, the last one was reducing numbers. It was very much about better infrastructure, better management of the infrastructure, better regulation, but not so much about the reduction of the numbers. It's about how those numbers are then managed. Minister, in the case of Montenegro, a specific policy that you would like to share in terms of either addressing seasonality. We already spoke about dispersal to lesser known destinations. Any specific policy that's being implemented that you think is relevant in this future we want?
Well, reducing seasonality is actually a huge thing. It's not just a topic that we put as a guideline for to have discussions. Reducing seasonality actually means better management of the flow, general flow of tourism, avoiding the pitfalls of over-tourism, whether some like to call it that way or not, but it does happen because of the high concentration in terms of the space and time of the tourists in a certain place. We have employed a number of policies aimed at reducing seasonality, but most of these policies are not exclusively touristic policies. Tourism heavily relies on many other industries, and so it's very much a field in which jurisdictions of various institutions, ministries, etc., collide or collaborate, whichever way you want to see it. Within the government, we have worked quite heavily on increasing connectivity, air connectivity. Montenegro is not an island country. However, from the perspective of many of our tourists, due to our geographical position, we are perceived and consumed as an island country. So air connectivity is extremely important. The size of Montenegro, it's very, very small. Actually, it goes into our favor because there are two airports in the country. So wherever you fly into Montenegro and wherever you are at a given moment, you're about maximum 2 hours away from any other point in the country. The increasing of air connectivity actually brings lots of benefits and a few or very, very scarce minus sides. The investment in road infrastructure, extremely important. I mentioned before that we have very developed southern part of the country, which is mostly beaches, and not developed enough northern part, which is becoming a rising star. More and more tourists are voting with their feet. They're going to the north, exploring, enjoying the pristine nature, the crystal clear lakes, the beautiful food, and the authentic way of life. So what we are, by increasing or bettering the connectivity with the northern part of Montenegro, we are actually preserving the nature, preserving the way of life, and that's the sustainability right there. We are not in the business of destroying what we are selling, and we plan to sell it over and over again. It seems to work. So through these policies, we are actually diminishing the seasonality, making it possible for people to come to Montenegro not only in July or August or January or December and January, but in other periods as well. And again, providing them something to do. If someone comes to your country, they want actually to do something. They want to sit in place. So other than offering them just sun and sand, and you can swim, there are many, many other things you can do in the horrible months of November or March or whatnot. And also we are investing in more modern and not developed enough, but there is a huge possibility of growth there and reducing seasonality, branches of tourism, such as health tourism and also MICE or Congress tourism. Extremely important, and we are beautifully positioned. We are within an hour and a half maximum flight away from anywhere in Europe. Weather is lovely, and and we're great people.
Thank you. Well, that's a great invitation to Montenegro. We are pressured with time, but I think it's clear that connectivity, infrastructure, and changing many of the policies which are around tourism, but not core tourism policies, will be essential to address some of those issues. And also, I think the examples of test and see how it works and adjust. I want to thank all the panelists for being with us today, and I want to then invite you to discuss some of these issues later on when we have our creation session. Deputy Prime Minister, thank you very much. Minister of Montenegro, Chairman of Uzbekistan, MP, Mr. Tar and Eduardo. Thank you. Round of applause to our panelists, and we continue with Cordula.
Thank you so much. And what a great panel, marvelous insights, and great listening to your experiences and your views on the topic of today's conference. With this, we are going for a half-an-hour break before we resume here in the room for our interactive sessions, where we will try to co-create solutions with you on the challenges that we are facing. So please take a nice rest now. We are meeting here at, I tell you, at 11:20. 11:20, we are in the room, please. Thank you so much again. Enjoy.
fil-maħdi l-art fuq dawn l-ilmijiet għaddew ix-xhur u għaddew il-jiem żamm dawn li bħraf fost dal-ħafna nies fuq baħar blu vjaġġ bla qies ħassejt li ruħi tħallini ftit spiċċajt dinja oħra fih tabib min-nar familti fost ħafna xkiel ħajat tal-għajnuna u mani flimkien u mani flimkien u mani flimkien ftit kont tagħmel tagħmel bħal sietna n-niet meta twelid ma kellix biex tfittxaw fartuħra ħabtu l-blieb hawn ġew minn fuq ma għaxu ma' nies mhux ġew maqfula bħal xi qattil ġejt hawn biex nitla' minn ħafna nkwiet għajat tal-għajnuna u mani flimkien Sbajjal fuq impenġi żewġ tuċċuf ismawi Nistelna għad penġijiet Kometi żgħar galassi kbar li jiġru daqs ir-riħ Spiċċajna niġru fuq l-irmijiet Għadinja żejra fost l-infinit Dinja fraġi mingħajr aptit Immorru d-dara xawtu l-ħin Il-lejlu dana huwa twil U hekk nintilfu f'dawl il-wien Ħaġa waħda jien u int Nies f'idejna nkawdu żmien Nollu jdejna l-fuq fl-imkien Sema skur li jibdel il-kulur għal-jum ġdid Iswed għal-marru jisir U edin għawn inkantaw U nildu ftit pjaċir Ejja namlu dal-lejbir Dinja zejra fost l-infinit Dinja fraġli minn għajra ptit Immorru d-dara xadu l-ħin Il-lejlu dana huwa twil U hekk nintilfu f'dal il-win Ħaġa waħda jien u int B'nies f'idejna ngawdu żmien Nollu jdejna l-fuq flimkien Tellaq loħ tellaq fuq fil-pront, fil-pront, fil-pront Bastiment ta' kurrent mill-bud, mill-bud, mill-bud Tellaq loħ tellaq fuq fil-pront, fil-pront, fil-pront Bastiment ta' kurrent mill-bud, mill-bud, mill-bud Ser naqbad qalbi unqatta ħabit ġiet fuq ħafna karti kbar mlija bil-win Ser niktab poezija dwar id-djufija ta' ħafna nisa u ħafna rġiel Ġranet fil-ħajja u ma dejjem twal Mimlija tlajja u bifti dwal Iżda snin huma qosra jitru parrieħ u jwaqqaf il-ħin u jkisser is-sħiħ Tellaq loħ tellaq fuq fil-pront, fil-pront, fil-pront Bastiment ta' kurrent mill-bud, mill-bud, mill-bud Tellaq loħ tellaq fuq fil-pront, fil-pront, fil-pront Bastiment ta' kurrent mill-bud, mill-bud, mill-bud Kim sendum nisma' biġliet ben lulit fuq wirt fuq flus bil-sinna bħal muż Ta' kollu li ġara għadda u mara bħal barb ta' frar u l-ħin li tar Spiċajna nduru dejjem wara l-istess pjaċir Flus fid-dinja huma biss li kbar kastik Tara li kulħadd fil-ħajja dejjem jilgħab l-istess logħba Flus huma vizzju li fihom nisfuga låg, tella l-fuq fil-pront Bastiment ta' kurrent mill-bord Tella låg, tella l-fuq fil-pront Bastiment ta' kurrent mill-bord Dejjax ijat nirtod zom li deja biex għatma nkunu l-bord Ġamar jaqbadek fil-viċin inħares ġewa fija kull ma nara u nisma U bis rejt Ta' gwerra li ma spiċċat qatt Tal-onuri li ma ħadhom ħadd Din il-gwerra li bdiet ftit Qed nistenna lilek tajni nwaqqaf il-gwerra li ma spiċċat qatt Tal-onuri li ma ħadhom ħadd Din il-gwerra li bdiet ftit Qed nistenna lilek tajni nwaqqaf il-ħin Ijat nirtod zom li deja biex għatma nkunu l-bord In-nar li joħroġ bejn it-tifrik Jista' jkun it-tama wara din il-ħerba li ħallit bis rejt Ta' gwerra li ma spiċċat qatt Tal-onuri li ma ħadhom ħadd Din il-gwerra li bdiet ftit Qed nistenna lilek tajni nwaqqaf il-gwerra li ma spiċċat qatt Tal-onuri li ma ħadhom ħadd Din il-gwerra li bdiet ftit Qed nistenna lilek tajni nwaqqaf il-ħin sanajtu biex naħarbu minn ġewwa wiet xemmu ser iżomna lanqas ta' nixkien niġġieldu kontra r-riħ il-juni fissilx minn ben l-irmi jekk tifhem xejdu l-klikeb qamartu lill-lejl tgħaraf minn fedela isħab fejn sejjer fejn terfes kull modija terraq kull imkien tkellem il-kull lejqa li tikber fil-ħolqien qodros fil-tra kollha u tmiss il-oċean titla' kull muntanja u titfi kull vulkan tifhem il-kull siġra u tkellem il-kull fjur tarot ma' kull dundut ma' kull asfur il-koll flimkien sanajtu biex naħarbu minn ġewwa wiet xemmu ser iżomna lanqas ta' nixkien niġġieldu kontra r-riħ il-juni fissilx minn belli rmit il-koll flimkien sanajtu biex naħarbu minn ġewwa wiet xemmu ser iżomna lanqas ta' nixkien niġġieldu kontra r-riħ il-juni fissilx minn belli rmit taf kull alfabet, toqgħod kull teorema, żarma kull kunċett, jekk toxob kull tbissima, tokrub kull uġieħ, taftoq il-klim kollu issib is-sens li fih. Jekk taf kif kien il-bidu kif se jkun it-tmiem, taf kull fuq kull isfel kull wara kull quddiem, il-ħajja mistoqsija miġbura fil-falix, bissirlek poeżija jekk kien ma tweġibi. Il-koll flimkien sanajtu biex naħarbu minn ġewwa wiet xemmu ser iżomna lanqas ta' nixkien niġġieldu kontra r-riħ, il-juni fissilx minn belli rmit. Il-koll flimkien sanajtu biex naħarbu minn ġewwa wiet xemmu ser iżomna lanqas ta' nixkien niġġieldu kontra r-riħ, il-juni fissilx minn belli rmit. Sanajtu biex naħarbu minn ġewwa wiet xemmu ser iżomna lanqas ta' nixkien niġġieldu kontra r-riħ il-juni fissilx minn belli rmit il-koll flimkien sanajtu biex naħarbu minn ġewwa wiet xemmu ser iżomna lanqas ta' nixkien niġġieldu kontra r-riħ il-juni fissilx minn belli rmit. Rajna tfajl taħt l-ilma Ikebbet nar fiskiet U kull ma setta jisma kien ikun il-bahar Waqt li jsir irmiet Il-bot mill-ġen tal-ħajja Waħdu fil-kwiet U kif ħares lejna Indunajna dak it-tfajl kien jien Jara l-mewġ jirtud Ġifen ebbu inħeba bħal mal-qamar jintefa Wara ġebla fil-bud U l-kulur tal-ħajja intefa u miet U kif ħares lejna indunajna dak it-tfajjel kien jien għalfejn nistaba mill-ħin kelli għalfejn noqgħod waħdi brasi ġol l-ilma ħares f'għajnejja u kontat li dejjem hawn inkun għalik għalfejn tibża miskien Għalfejn nistaba mill-ħin kelli għalfejn noqgħod waħdi brasi ġol l-ilma ħares f'għajnejja u kontat li dejjem hawn inkun għalik għalfejn biex nistaqsik konċ taħseb fija meta naħseb fik Tmurx il-but għajdli fil-pront il-mistoqsija bis-salik Ersaq fil-qrib biex nistaqsik konċ taħseb fija meta naħseb fik Tmurx il-but għajdli fil-pront il-mistoqsija bis-salik Meta nibda naħseb dan iż-żmien li għaddej jiġri aktar mir-rif Nibda naħseb xi tip ta' melodija biex inwassallek mistoqsija Kif qed tħossok ja ftit qed nafrilek ħajja mingħajr il-bit mingħajr restrizzjoni m'hemmx konfużjoni għal ħajja mingħajr umiljazzjoni Meta nkunu jien u int l-aqwa li nkunu tnejn flimkien tistax id-dinja ssir nirien u kollox jaqa' jsir il-min Imkien nikbu stejjer kbar li jixalu daqs dak l-akbar nar li qabad meta konna għadna żgħar u wassalna hawn ġo din id-dar Ersaq fil-qrib biex nistaqsik kontx taħseb fija meta naħseb fik Mhux il-bud għajdli fil-pront il-mistoqsija bis-salik Ersaq fil-qrib biex nistaqsik kontx taħseb fija meta naħseb fik Mhux il-bud għajdli fil-pront il-mistoqsija bis-salik xarbu bl-ilma frisk ħarstek fis-sirt li xi trid tajt memorji l-għamilna matul is-sajf fuq ħaġorti bit-bissima ħassejna l-kesħa ta' ziffa fina fuq tal-linja biex immorru l-bajja fejn ħadna birra u gawdejna l-ħajja meta nkunu jien u int l-aqwa li nkunu tnejn flimkien tistax id-dinja ssir nirien u kollox jaqa' jsir irmien flimkien nikbu
Good morning. Can we settle down, please? Thank you. Can we settle down and start the next session? Next session is going to be more participative, and therefore for those of you sitting on tables by yourself or with just one or two colleagues, I would urge you to move to another table so that we have some scale. Economies of scale. It will also reduce the number of reports per table. So I have, for example, a table there, but those are speakers, so I think they can stay as they are. Could you perhaps combine your two tables there, 1, 2, if possible? There's also a table down there with 3 and one with 3. Can you combine, please? Please, I hope it will happen. The format is different. The format is not so much presentations and question and answer. This is going to be more interactive, hopefully more polemical. Hopefully also really addressing head-on the challenges we're supposed to be talking about as we move forward, driving the tourism we want. You know, driving brings to mind cars, I don't know why. And cars have become infernally complicated these days. There used to be a time when something went wrong with your car, you opened the bonnet, you know, and you fix it somehow, or you take out the jack. Now a car is a computer. So you don't really control it anymore, right? You just drive. And by the way, what about driverless vehicles? You don't even need to drive. So we seem to be heading in a direction, at least as far as automobiles are concerned, where the thing just drives itself. Can we say the same thing about tourism? Tourism driving itself. Driving itself, crashing into a wall, going down a slope, going up a hill. The metaphors just boggle the mind. My name is Godfrey Baldacchino. I'm a professor of sociology at the University of Malta. I'm just introducing myself here for expediency's sake. Welcome to this session where we are going to address driving tourism towards the future we want. We can break down this statement in many different ways. I'm thinking a lot about travel. One of the words that I didn't hear this morning from Professor Jafari's not tourism definition, anthropology, culture, etc. Travel, movement, mobility, it seems to be almost a right these days. People assume that life, in fact, life is about mobility. Life is about movement. Practically all living things move. And in Malta, we have a way of defining poverty. There are 10 dimensions of poverty, and if I think you hit 4 of those 10, you are classified officially as a poor person. And one of those 10 is the ability to go on a week-long holiday once a year. So if you cannot do that in Malta, guys, you're poor. It says a lot, right? So mobility has become embedded practically in the expectations of modern life. What do? This is the fastest growing middle class in the history of human civilization. And I think it goes without saying that people in the middle class, especially, or those who think they are in the middle class or want to be, aspire to movement within their country, but also outside their country, across borders, for various reasons. They like to visit, they like to go to, and I quote, nice places, however they are defined. So this is the challenge we have with us today, this morning. I also understand we're coming to tourism from different positions on the tourism cycle. Some of us still want to grow the industry. Some of us want to spread the goods. Some of us are concerned with bottlenecks that are appearing in different places. But I think we share a concern that this is an important industry, it's a significant industry. We want to see it thrive. And as has been said this morning, it must continue to grow. This is not me, this is Mr. Tzitzikostas' words. It must continue to grow. That's a fairly strong statement. Unfortunately, I agree, because the demand side of tourism is growing. I think that it will be naive to assume that tourism is going to plateau somehow at some point. Perhaps it will plateau only when the population of the planet plateaus. We'll see. In the meantime, we have an interactive session. We're going to present to you 8, what are they called? Proposed challenges, that's the word. The UN Tourism Secretariat has put together 8 challenges. I'm not going to ask how these challenges were determined, but they cover different aspects of the topic. And well, somebody has already started the exercise. I think you basically understand what you are asked to do here. There is a QR code that will take you to the Mentimeter website. And we have these 8 challenges, which I will explain very, very briefly before you start pressing. Number 1 is data. By the way, if you have bad eyesight, but you don't want to admit it, I'm going to read them to you. Data gaps and monitoring. Is this the challenge that we're facing? This is one of the main challenges that we're facing. Or perhaps even too much data these days. There's data everywhere, and sometimes it feels like trying to drink water from a hosepipe, which is a bit challenging, to say the least. Second is governance approaches. Is the governance piece that's missing, really? Whether it's local government, national, regional, or European. Is that where the main challenge lies? The third is vertical coordination. So how do we apply priorities, particularly where responsibilities may be distributed across different aspects of government? Remember, there are still countries in the world where there is no minister of tourism. Of course, there is a minister somewhere responsible for tourism. But the nomenclature of that person does not necessarily state this. So that in itself also reflects on the positionality of the priorities, of the policy priorities of those jurisdictions. Fourth is public-private partnerships. How do these two worlds collide? How do they speak to each other? How do they bring out the best in each other? Public-private partnerships, that's number 4. Number 5 is demand management. How destinations may need to influence, control, drive, I think is the active verb here. What happens, where it happens, how it happens, where tourism is concerned. Issues of seasonality, for example, issues of distribution, issues of relieving pressure from hotspots, from bottlenecks, and somehow transferring the load on areas that are more thirsty, more eager for that kind of commitment. The 6th is regulatory frameworks, the instruments, the tools that we use, the laws. Somebody this morning spoke about how sometimes the legislator is running after the industry, trying to catch up, never catching up, instead of having laws that somehow preempt and create the framework for suitable tourism policies. The 7th is resident and community engagement. How do local communities get involved meaningfully, not necessarily organizing themselves to block tourism, which unfortunately is also becoming a factor of life in many countries. That's how tourism sometimes becomes of concern at a local level. And finally, number 8 is the insufficient capacity for policy implementation. There may be bottlenecks in financial resources, in technical expertise, in institutional capacity, or enforcement mechanisms. Of course, there may be other themes, and at some point I will be asking you if you think there's something evidently absent from this selection. But in the meantime, please bear with me, we have to do with these 8, and you are being asked to choose the 3 most pressing challenges. And I guess you've done that by now. So as you can see, a fairly obvious couple of no choices, 1 and 2. Doesn't seem to be an issue. In the meantime, we have 3 obvious priorities, starting with the one scoring 25 hits, resident and community engagement. That's the top choice for now, followed closely by governance and whole of governance approaches. And thirdly, not too far behind, demand management and visitor flows. So these are the 3 themes. And what we're going to do now, guys, we're going to invite a distinguished panel to join me here on stage. And I'm going to ask one question, the same question to the whole panel, to comment about what they think about this exercise and why perhaps they may agree or disagree that these 3 issues top the concern agenda. So, can I please invite Marlene Barthes, DG Move from the European Commission. She has to leave at 1, so we have to make sure we'll try to finish in a very expedited way. We have Mr. Tom Jenkins, who joins us from the European Tour Operators Association. We have Professor Marina Novelli, Director of Sustainable Travel and Tourism at the Research Centre, Nottingham University in the UK, and Chair of the World Committee on Tourism Ethics within UN Tourism, and Mr. David O'Brien, CEO Malta Air and Lauda Europe. All these colleagues have been taking notes feverishly this morning, and possibly they will use this time to vent perhaps some frustrations about what they've heard and some of the issues that they have raised. Jaume, yes, please join us, join as well. Jaume joins us from the Valencia Foundation, and he's responsible for sustainable tourism policies. Thank you so much. So this part of the conversation is easy. Let me move here. Try to keep it short but sweet. And I'm going to ask you all to respond to the same question. You've seen how the panel has responded, how the colleagues have responded. I would ask you for your quick reactions. And in the meantime, of course, I'm sure you're going to tease in some comments in relation to what was said this morning. David, why don't you start?
Is this working? Not a good, oh, it is working, pardon me. Okay, I'm going to be slightly controversial and say, in a way, the survey doesn't matter because we all know. I mean, when it comes to data, I think everyone can see the woods, so what's the point in trying to count the trees? You know, we can see where the gaps are, we know that Barcelona is a hotspot, we know Venice is a hotspot, but at the same time, we also know that Vigo, that Valladolid, that Jerez have half-empty airports. It's quite easy to transfer people. Now, the idea that in some form of Enver Hoxha, Albanian old system way, you can direct people around Europe, that's not true, but you can attract them. And there's a couple of ways of attracting people, there's a couple of ways of deterring people, but the primary way is money. And I'll give you a very simple example. If you take Austria and the Ryanair group, Austria has very high airport taxes and high airport charges. They're not coming down, so we've moved 1 million people to Bratislava. And they're going to Bratislava instead of Vienna. In the case of Spain, where we recognize that Barcelona is a hotspot, but unfortunately, and this goes to the governance point, on the governance point, I think at the root of most of the European problems is actually the airport concession model in Europe. Now, that may seem a bit distant and strange to say, but Spain is run by one airport company who decide what the prices are going to be in every airport. No regional control, nothing. It doesn't matter what Vigo does to promote its area, and it's beautifully located halfway between Porto and Santiago. Jerez gives you access to Seville, it gives you access to Cadiz, and most importantly, it gives you access to Jerez. But because a single monopoly, with the interests of its shareholders, to whom it paid 800 million in dividends just recently, have essentially allowed those airports to be half empty. So there isn't a construction or a capacity issue. There's an enabling issue. And if you look at the mission of the UN Tourism Group organization, its mission is to promote responsible, sustainable, and universally accessible tourism. Now, you can't create universally accessible tourism by legitimately increasing the prices to diminish demand in certain locations without giving people an alternative opportunity. Take Greece. Commissioner Tsitsikostas' own town of Thessaloniki. Well, that's owned effectively by Fraport, a German airport company, which the German government, during the economic crisis, essentially forced Greece to hand over all of the island airports to Fraport. Now, the consequence of that is it doesn't require data. Walk through Chania in Crete in November, it's empty. Thessaloniki will shortly be empty, and it's a wonderful, beautiful place. On the day that the Greek government correctly, in our view, eliminated their €9 passenger tax, Fraport put up the airport fee by €9. Now, I know I'm beating a particular drum, but if there's nowhere else for people to go, they won't go there. It's about connectivity. So my big argument, if you like, is people need to be enabled, not controlled.
Thank you so much, David. I think let's stay in Spain, because David used a lot of examples from Spain and Portugal. Why don't you go directly to Jaume and Valencia? I'm sure you have something to say.
Valencia? No, I think Valencia is my colleague here.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, from the local point of view, we are out of this discussion. I mean, we had this discussion years ago. We mentioned these days with the region, the states are ruling all these airports, all these infrastructures, all this transport, politics and strategies for a national level. But let me stress one thing that I've realized from the challenges that has been chosen. How the concern of the audience, how we have shifted from the economics, from the demands and supplies, towards social. What people say. We left aside something that for me, it's the elephant in the room, which is the environmental side. And I told before and during the coffee, it will affect more than we think. We are forgiving that climate change will affect more than any taxes, many restrictions, many strategies that we can put on the table. And it's already affecting both demand and supply. And we are, well, with these challenges, we're talking about data and management and policies. We have to take into account, to monitor, to measure, and to put this cost also in the spreadsheet to understand what kind of policy in Europe, in Spain, or in Valencia we need. Because we are claiming for this neutral carbon city or region or state, but we are not measuring and we're not putting how much it costs in environmental terms. But on the other side, it affects us directly. People is looking for cooler destinations. And we are attracting and we're putting the best museums and the best attractions and the best dinner and best gastronomy, but people will live to the north. And we are flowing to the Atlantic instead of the Mediterranean because it's so warm. It's unpleasant sometimes. So I wanted to stress that because if not, we are losing in English, don't count the wood for the trees. It's the expression, sorry, I learned that. Because when I mentioned the other day, talking about the challenge, the urban heat challenge in Malta. The Eisenhower principle, what's urgent and what's important. Climate change now it's important and it's urgent. The case we had in Valencia, we are planning strategies, blah, 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 and suddenly the flash floods affect and destroyed part of our metropolitan area, killed more than 100 people, and we didn't expect it. Why? Because we didn't take into account this effect, and this will affect and affected us. We had to put in €1 million campaign suddenly because people canceled. We lost our conferences. We lost our people because they were afraid of that region. Yes. They thought, you're destroyed, you're trying to swim in the mud. It wasn't a fact, it wasn't real, but we had to react. So we cannot expect to the year 2050, and we are focusing on the social side, but the neighbors are affected by climate change, and they will shift. We are in a rich world, and we are very comfortable, and we are saying, well, too many people now. If they are away and the COVID comes, we need more people. So they will shift. We can please everybody. But the real challenge is how climate change is already affecting our lives.
Thank you for reminding us of that. And it's interesting that indeed climate change is conspicuous in its absence, I think, from those dimensions that were on the board earlier. Let's go to Marina. What's your take on these challenges selected by our audience?
Interestingly, when we were asked to vote, I wanted to press everyone. We were limited to only 3. And why is that? Because I firmly believe that in the current era of climate change, disruptions of any sorts, there is an element where I hear conversation, and I've been in this space for best part of 20 years now, where the measurement of success is still growth and is still very much managed in a spatial way rather than structural way. And I'll use an example. The example is, for instance, the word that nobody wants to use, which is over-tourism, on which I've had the privilege and the curse of doing quite a bit of research over the past 10 years. And I'm a true believer, based on those evidence, which started very much working on a report for the TRAN committee of the European Commission, and that is where we started really looking at the issue. So, and that report started with claiming that redistributing pressure elsewhere without addressing the structural cause of excessive demand, governance gaps, and capacity limits will not solve the problem. And there are 5 key issues which I kind of try to frame in the context of what the dimension we're asked to vote are. One is the issue of, and this is where probably I'm going to lose my new friend here on my left, volume constitution issue. And whether we like it or not, there are evidence that, and we heard the Deputy Prime Minister earlier saying, visitors caps and quotas. You know, if you put numbers, you know, we've studied carrying capacity for decades, and Professor Jafar Jafari is one of the father of our discipline, and we've been talking about it for so many years. It's about time we actually put it in practice. We've talked and written about limit of acceptable change. Let's put it into practice. So, and again, you know, we've had measures like time entry systems, dynamic marketing pricing. And then the second issue is about dispersal reproduces existing tourism models. So what we do, we shift the tourists off the beaten track, but then we recreate another Santorini. I come from Puglia in southern Italy, specifically Bari, which is now one of the most sought after destinations in Europe. I remember 20 years ago when I moved overseas, nobody knew where Bari was. If you speak to anybody now, from the Americas to Asia to South Africa, everybody knows where that is, and we are becoming victim of our own success. So to conclude, my point is, can we try and find ways which are rather structurally based than spatially based? Because only in that way we can truly really make a shift in the agenda. And like my colleague here on the right was saying, you know, whether it is Spain or Malta or southern Italy, the issue is that we have got the models. We do have the solutions. We just need to put them truly into practice.
Thank you, Marina. Very provocative points. And I turn to Tom now.
You wanted me to comment on the... is it possible to have the chart up again?
Can we bring the chart up again, please, on the screen?
You want me to comment on it? It's coming. Oh. Different thing. Look, while it's coming...
The previous chart.
It's coming.
Not the next one.
the one with all the voting on it. Although while it was coming, I was just reflecting on Warren Buffett was asked to comment on what makes a successful marriage. I will come to that in a minute. What an interesting chart. My reaction to this chart is, this is a seriously unbalanced chart. You need to spread it around a bit. You've got far too much responses in the resident and community engagement. You've got no responses in the vertical coordination. And I know I voted for vertical coordination, so there was no response in that. So could you not even it up a bit? Well, you should be able to even up it a bit. It's easier for you to even that up a bit than it is for
peer
tourism.
pressure, please.
It's for tourism to even it up a bit. And the problem with the discussion we're having at the moment is it's largely a client-free zone. Tourism without clients is nothing. And what clients are is they're individuals making individual decisions as to how they want to spend their money and spend their time. And we're looking at it as if there's a sort of top-down phenomenon which we can govern things, spread them around, tell them to go here, do this, do that. They don't. They do what they want to do. And they want to do what they know about. And there are ways of solving this problem. I'm not saying it's insoluble, but it's a really big problem. Someone cited Venice before. Venice, for 50 years, has tried to spread demand throughout Venice, from the main axis between Piazzale Roma, the Rialto, and San Marco. They have utterly failed to spread demand throughout Venice in the last 50 years. And so if a city with lots of money and lots of interest in tourism cannot do that, we are going to have a real struggle to do that in Europe. Second thing, I was just simply saying that the Warren Buffett, this was a semi-light-hearted remark, he was saying, you know, he was asked what makes a successful marriage. And he said, well, I can tell you, it's not a shared sense of humor. It's not physical attraction. It's not wealth. It's not a similar family background. It's one thing. It's low expectations. And that's what I would say to people if they're looking at tourism. Tourism is an economic activity. And if you have an economic activity which is going up and is successful, it will create winners and it will create losers. You cannot have expenditure without people losing out. And success is far more painful for a city than failure. Failure is fine. The people who lose disappear. They just go. Success, you've got the people who are not winning hanging around going, I'm not winning, because they've got all these other things flooding in, displacing them from their localities and moving around. So all I'm saying is that I suppose an instant response to this is a massively complicated problem, even if you look at it at an individual city level. And given that all the cities are different, we're looking at a complication cubed problem in terms of generalization, and yet we continue to generalize about it.
Thank you, Tom. No doubt about it. It's a complicated problem, but you have to start from somewhere. So disaggregating the complexity is hopefully one way to promote the discussion and the analysis. But let's go to the Brussels desk now. Marlene, what do you think?
I mean, I'm not surprised by the results we see on the screen. I think maybe some of the challenges, coming back to your comment, Tom, are a little bit overlapping. You know, you look at governance and maybe vertical coordination, isn't that sort of part of governance as well? Or even regulatory framework. So I feel like the categories are maybe not even, which explains a little bit the imbalance. And then all of the high-ranking ones are also very much linked. First one, resident and community engagement. I mean, we heard a lot about this morning, so I think there's maybe no need to stress it that much, but it's very much linked to demand management and visitor flows, which essentially is concentration, right? So concentration in time and space, which is basically the issue we're trying to sort of address here. You mentioned data, you don't need data, you just have to drive around. Actually, we do have data as well, which is necessarily, if you cannot drive around and look for yourself. Eurostat has data on tourism specifically, and it shows that 1 out of 3 nights spent in tourism accommodation happen in July and August alone. So there is data showing that at least in terms of time, this is where nights spent happen. We also have data on space, so around 80% of tourism demand is located in 20% of destinations, areas. So again, we see with data that there is a real problem. I liked your point earlier saying that cost is what drives demand. And then Jaume reflected that actually there's cost, but it's also safety. And this very much reflects, actually, I don't know if ETC is still in the room, so the European Travel Commission, they have this barometer where they survey people in long-haul destinations, but also within Europe. And one of the questions is to see, you know, what is that influences your travel choice? And it's exactly what you just said, cost and safety. So these are the 2 elements that you have to keep in mind if you want to attract or disperse also demand, which all links to the 3rd challenge, ranking challenge here, which is governance, which for me is the one I put first, but that's because I work in an institution trying to govern something we don't have a real competence on, even though we heard this morning that there's lots of EU competences that pertain to tourism, be it, you know, connectivity, environment, climate, urban planning, regional development, etc. So for me, the #1 challenge in my capacity is governance. We have 27 EU member states. If we look just at the EU, not all of them have a Ministry of Tourism. We have over 1,100 regions across Europe, which have very different challenges. I mean, if you go to the Alps or a coastal destination or an island destination like Malta, they don't have the same problems. They don't want the same solutions. They don't need the same type of funding. So how do you govern that at EU level when you don't even have a real competence? So for me, the #1 challenge, I would say, is governance. I don't think that, I mean, destinations know the risks. They know the risk they're facing. Most of them do. And this links now to what was said earlier as well. What we need to do is to give them the tools to, you know, better coordinate and implement existing solutions. And there we have a number of tools at EU level, but I don't think we're supposed to talk about that now. I think more when spreading out later and looking at solutions, I'm happy to provide some of the tools we have to try and address this very complex issue indeed.
Fantastic. Thank you, Marlene. So we are running well on time. I'm trying to recover the time lost in the earlier session in the morning. Thank you for those comments. We're going to switch immediately to the 2nd phase of the session, where you come in again and you have some homework to do. So I'm going to thank the panel. Well done.
Godfrey, may I just
comments?
take one moment? I'm sorry.
Okay.
Which is, while I found
Briefly.
the contributions, very briefly, of the two Maltese politicians really interesting, because they're right up close and personal to these things. They're not theorizing. They have to deal with the community. They have to deal with the connections. But I must be allowed to correct MEP Attard on his point about routes. We have 70 routes to Malta, and if you consider that Heathrow has 105 direct connections to Europe, and Ryanair alone has 70 direct connections to Europe from Malta, I think he was being a little bit unfair. Thank you.
Thank you for that fact. Fantastic. I'm going to ask the panelists to join different tables, please. You've been very patient listening to us. And there's a lot of expertise in the room, of course. So what we're going to do now, we're going to co-create solutions for these shared challenges. And we're going to pick your brains, your expertise, your experiences in order to shift from the shared challenges to the shared solutions, right? There's a lot of expertise here. You've seen as well earlier some attempts by the chair to try to even prod for concrete examples of good practice, for instance, that I think are very helpful in these situations, so that we move from the lofty realms of just theory down to the practical level. And we have a second multimeter exercise. So can we have the second multimeter exercise on the screen, please? Right. So you have 10 minutes per table to consider, this time, the solutions to the challenges we have identified earlier. Let me remind you what the challenges, the main challenges are. We have three. One is about governance, the politics of it all, the coordination across ministries, agencies, policy units, and not just in tourism, of course. We're talking about environment, we're talking about transport, we're talking about culture, we're talking about housing, we're talking about planning, regional development, right? All these somehow intersect. The easiest way out of this question is just to say it's complex. Well, sorry, we can't stop there. We have to address the complexity somehow. So that's the first of the three dimensions. The second dimension is demand management and visitor flows. How do we use prods, tweaks, nudges, incentives, taxes, carrots, sticks, you name it, in order to change behaviors, perhaps, to shift flows, even though at the same time, we've had a presenter reminding us that perhaps the problem is not necessarily spatial. Perhaps it needs to be tackled from different dimensions, including temporality, of course, the time dimension, seasonality, time of the day when tourists are out, day of the week when the tourists are out, day of the week when the cruise ship arrives. It makes a big difference to a destination, right? That's the second. And the third, by way of reminding, is resident and community engagement. How well are residents organized to engage with the policymakers, with the governance piece? So these are two columns now, two of your answers kind of speaking to each other, right? NGOs, civil society, small businesses. They are many, but at the same time, paradoxically, they are the least well organized. They are the least having effective lobbies in the center of power, center of government. So how do they get to work together? Why is it necessary for communities to resist tourism, to oppose tourism sometimes? Because they feel that they have not been sufficiently heard or not heard at all. So we are going to assign 10 minutes per table for you to develop text. This time you have to text, you have to write. You have a maximum of, is it 400 characters if I remember well? So it's about, what is it? 200, 300 words, I think, approximately, where you actually, after discussing around your table, of course, appoint a rapporteur or a secretary for that person to come up with a few suggestions of the solutions to these 3 challenges. And the clock starts now. It's okay to talk.
الشمس تيلا من طرف تمام اردم مالي ما يسبيتشات من طرف الدنيا من قلب صحاب البوت مشكل قلب الناتورا فيوري سجار الشمس خدورة عينيك لا ومملية دموع أفصل ديا باش نهو الروح
Okay, I'm not very
Yes. Can I speak? Yes. Just to remind you, you have 10 minutes for the first challenge, which is written on the board, Solutions to Resident and Community Engagement. For the 2 other challenges, you'll have 2 other rounds of 10 minutes each. Sorry about that.
fil-maħdillar fuq dawn l-ilmijiet għaddew ix-xhur u għaddew il-jiem żamm dawn l-ibra fost dal-ħafna nies fuq baħar blu vjaġġ bla qies ħassejt li ruħi tħallini ftit spiċċajt dinja oħra fih tabib minnar familti fost ħafna xkiel ħajat tal-għajnuna u ma nifli
You have 5 minutes left to address the first theme, please. And be sure to write your pithy comment on the website. Remember to type your solutions, please, per table. So far, we have 2 solutions on the board. So 4 tables have yet to write their answer. Thank you.
Sbajjal fuq impenġi żewġ tuċċuf ismawi L-istelna għad penġijiet Kometi żgħar galassi kbar li jiġru daqs ir-riħ Spiċċajna niġru fuq l-irmijiet Ta' dinja żejra fost l-infinit Dinja fraġi mingħajr aptit Immorru d-dana xagħtu ħin Il-lejlu tagħna huwa twil U hekk nintilfu f'dawl il-wien Ħaġa waħda jien u int Nies f'idejna ngawdu żmien Nollu jdejna l fuq flimkien Sema skur li jibdel il-kulur għal-jum ġdid Iswed madru jisir U edin hawn inkantaw U nildu ftit pjaċir Ejja namlu dal-li kbir Dinja żejra fost l-infinit Dinja fraġli mingħajr aptit Immorru d-dara xagħtu l-ħin Il-lejlu tagħna huwa twil U hekk nintilfu f'dal il-wien Ħaġa waħda jien u int B'nies f'idejna ngawdu żmien Nollu jdejna l fuq flimkien Nollu jdejna l fuq flimkien
Right, so you heard the bell, closing bell for the first round, and I'm waiting for the last table to post its comment. We have 5 out of 6. Okay, fantastic. You have a comment coming up now? All right. Can you read from there? No, I thought so. I'm going to read them for you, for your benefit. So, collaboration in practical ways with host structure and local community, like a local ambassador of cultural and natural heritage. An example is local products in hotels. Leave the local democratic process, but this process has to be informed by intelligent discussion and consultation. Cooperational tourism business/local community projects. Enforcement of rules, noise, housing, etc. Communication, measurement of resident sentiment. And may I add, across time, not just once, across time, to get trends. Formal structured consultations followed by specific topical workshops leading to an action plan or strategy plus monitoring. Make sure all stakeholders are involved. The future of tourism depends on achieving a healthy balance between economic growth, environmental responsibility, and the well-being of local communities. Important residents feel respected and involved. And finally, we have 7 tables apparently. My mathematics is completely wrong this morning. 8. What's happening here? Make communities able to shape solutions and correlate different data linking tourism with water, garbage, electricity consumption, and other indicators. Finally, awareness of the importance of tourism by the local population, engaging residents in decision-making, tourism offer, spreading across time and space through events in shoulder season and mobility. Interesting. There is no tourism without the client. Sometimes we talk about tourism without involving the tourist. We take it for granted so much. So, these are the comments, and we are allowed a few minutes for any urgent reactions to these comments. Who would like to comment, pass remarks? We have a roving mic, I believe, somewhere. On the tables, there are mics already. So, anyone from this table here? Any comment? Charles, anything to say? Yes, go for it. Briefly.
These comments, I mean, they are very good for the current elections, campaigns. Strange enough, I haven't heard anything about tourism in this campaign in Malta. And my question is, when there are similar campaigns in other European countries, where is tourism? Is it one of the pillars? Is it one that one should take care of and plan for the next 5 years?
Okay.
So that's my comment here.
It's a good point.
But
So
I think it's a great way of getting these points and not losing them.
that's an excellent observation. I think perhaps one of the reasons why tourism is not on the agenda right now during the political campaign is because there's no difference between the main political parties on where tourism should go. So I'm not sure whether that's necessarily a positive thing. So there's limited criticism of the model, you know. So at the same time, I hope you've taken a screenshot of this so that you can pass it to the minister responsible for tourism. Next table. Any urgent comments? You're okay. Table at the back. Anything to say? No. Table over here. Anything to add? No. Table over there. Yes, please. Marlene.
Maybe just briefly, because we didn't have time to write it down or
Okay.
space. But also what was reflected this morning in the discussion is that if you invest for residents first, tourism will benefit. So whatever you do, be it infrastructure planning, health, public transport, cultural offer, we talked about events, concerts, etc. If it benefits residents, it then will also have a positive effect on tourism. So you should probably think of residents first and tourism comes later.
I think it's an iterative process here. It's not an easy cause and effect relationship. You may build tourism infrastructure, which helps to build settlements and people living permanently in places, and the other way around. You build communities, at the same time they become tourism destinations. Thank you. Table over there. Yes, please.
I think there were two key points that colleagues, we are primarily a Maltese group, but very helpful because brought us back to two important aspects. One is the issue of identity versus authenticity, and that one cannot be preserved for tourism purposes, for sustainable tourism product development, if the residents' communities are not actively involved. So the solution might well be related to institutionalized participatory planning at the very beginning. And then the other aspect, which was very evident in the conversation, is that very often outsiders play a very important role in the planning of the tourism destinations, and it's important that that process becomes more inclusive in terms of local skills and local knowledge and local expertise. And finally, the issue of avoiding symbolic participation through legitimacy given to community members and compliance with tourism management measures, which very often are imposed from the outside rather than co-constructed at a local level.
Thank you so much. So the identity, authenticity dilemma, the whole business of who controls, who's driving the car, who's driving the industry, and finally the demand piece, right? The way in which the locals are actually involved in the decisions being taken. Excellent. Final, and did I miss any tables? I don't think so. Yes, please.
I have another comment from another perspective.
Please.
We're taking tourism as it's happening by default and for granted. And nowadays we're living a geopolitical situation that affected many countries and put it down on their knees when the tourism is the backbone of that country. What are we going to do about that? This is also important for the locals to know that they are living from tourism. And this is something not to be taken for granted. So tourism is not the bad factor in this place here. We have to discuss it from both ways. It's important. Many unemployment will happen. Lots of damages will come out of this. So it's very important. We're living it.
Yes, and we lived it during COVID.
Exactly.
And of course, those countries that are for some reason have been affected by war, I mean, what comes to mind, for example, is Cyprus.
Yes.
Cyprus was the recipient of one missile in the current US-Iran crisis.
Actually,
one missile,
which
was shot down. Still,
Mhm.
you know, various people have changed their plans.
Yeah.
So thank you for that comment. Okay, so that ends round one. I'm running a deficit of 45 seconds. That's not too bad. We move to round two. Thank you. So now we repeat the exercise. You have 10 minutes in your group to discuss plausible solutions to demand management and visitor flows. Clock starts now.
xi kultura, ħaġa waħda, man natura, skit perfett, xejn ma kien għadu hekk mod direttu f'kull suġġett, il-fantasija u l-illużjoni li nkwiet mhuwiex is-soluzzjoni. Dan il-ġmien nibsu l-ibsa li taqadna flimkien dan ir-riskiet, żisfatari. Dan il-waqt il-bot minn kollox u minn kulħadd qalbi sħar.
walking.
كيف المهدلات فوق down للمية عدى والشو وعدى واليم زعمضان البراف فوق صدال هفنانيس فوق بحر بلو بيعج بلاقيس عسيت لروحي تحلي نفتيت سبيت شاي دنيا راف ارتبيت من نعرف عملتي فوصف مشكلة عيات العينونا وما نفهم كين وما نفهم كين وما نفهم كين وما نفهم كين فيش كنت عامل بحال سيتنا النيل بقدر تولي دمع كلش بيش تتشاف فرطول رايح حبطو البيت عون جو مفهوم ما عاشو مع نيس مش جو مقفول لا بحال شي قدين جيت عم بشنطلع من هفنا نكويد عيط العينونا وما نفهم كيف
Only unruly students. Less than 3 minutes to go, guys, and please start tapping your answers.
تمر الدار جاتو الهين الليل دانا هو طويل وهيك ننتلفو
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Time up. And I can see this was a more engaging conversation, judging from the time it has taken for each table to reach its conclusions. We have 4 so far. I hope the others will be coming up soon. In the meantime, let me just read. Train artificial intelligence to display content you want to see for your destinations. Use digital solutions for visitor management and payment of entrance fees. Make public transport attractive to decrease number of cars on the road. Managing experience of visitors for cases of severe overcrowding. There must be discussions about restrictions/limitations. Communication to potential second-time visitors for less known places. Design tourism products for other seasons. Enhance capabilities for people to travel all year round. Diversification of trip proposals. Carrying capacity and cost-benefit analysis. Data-driven and technologically backed smart management of flows. Coordination between transport providers, accommodation, and policymakers. And the last one I have so far here, improve infrastructure, connectivity, water and waste management, and diversify the destinations and niche experiences in marketing. It seems like there's a common trend here, technology to the rescue, perhaps. You know very well that some countries are trying to shift from a material, a physical visitor experience to something that's more supported by augmented reality, for example, virtual reality, etc. So you don't actually visit a site, you visit a reproduction, a 3D reproduction of a site, for example, in order to try to alleviate flows, physical flows from that site and others. Is that it? Anyone else yet to submit? So let's move to comments from the different tables. Starting again from here. Any comments from the table at this side? Charles, again, you have a lot to say today.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, we were actually discussing how visitor flows can be managed in a better way, and it was quite a challenge for us. However, one solution could be is to create interest groups that are more engaged in sustainable activities. And in doing so, maybe they will opt, instead of having a 3-course meal every day, they might opt to traditional meals, which are simpler, creating less waste, less food waste, and so on. The visitor flows comes because they are all coming in summer and maybe less in winter. And by engaging in different activities, you can also support that movement of tourism from the peak seasons to less.
Listen, it sounds very good in theory.
Yeah. But it's
the devil's in the detail.
What I was
How do we do that thing happen? How do we make it happen?
What I was trying to explain, that there are some sustainable hotels in Malta that are really becoming sustainable. So their carbon footprint is going down. But they are also engaging with communities around the world who make these tours to different countries to learn more about natural things. It could be yoga. It could be how historic Malta.
Fringe activities, as they're sometimes called.
So it is catching up. But of course, it is not very popular yet. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Next table. Any comments? Grab the mic, please. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we pointed out AI, the impact of AI in our role as DMOs or NTOs or whatever, because we are not anymore influencing directly to the customers, to our clients, because they are looking the info at the AI. So our webs, our apps, etc., we are losing visitors per thousands, because they look at the AI might look at our content, and that's the way we could influence. Where's the point where we have contact? If we sell tickets or we have or make bookings or we sell transport, etc. That's the point of contact. But before, we're losing the...
That's a good point.
We're losing the control.
AI has introduced another interface between the client and the industry and the experience, and we are still trying to catch up already with artificial intelligence. Even though it's early days, but still, we're lagging. Table at the back, please. Anyone? No? Okay. Table over here. No? Table over here. Yes, please.
We are telling, we have us as a tourism board, tourism destination, design better product for out of the season.
Who is us? Who are you?
Destinations. Speaking about
just destinations. Okay.
Design product for out of the season. Enhance capabilities for people to travel all year round. That means perhaps it's managing work time differently, allowing schools to have weeks where children are out of school during the year and not only during summertime. 3 is incentivize airlines or transportation to make year-round travel and not only in summertime we are going to Côte d'Azur, in wintertime we are going to Japan. No, make them, it's part, because those guys are helping us to make money, they are making money. It's a two-way deal. So you want the flight in summertime, you have to put at least 2 weeks, 2-day week flight in wintertime as well. So that's the first pillar to start being also out of the season.
It will be interesting to see whether all these ideas are actually accompanied by good practices, where they've actually been tried and been successfully implemented. Thank you. Table over there.
It has, yeah.
Please.
Just one more point. We've obviously highlighted the importance of clearer regulation and enforcement. Some people were talking about the numbers in hotspot. It's okay, but then if you've got illegal practice still taking place, it won't work. Then applying behavioral nudging tools like real-time information, dynamic pricing, time slot access, itinerary building. I mean, we talk about digital disruption. Let's use them positively rather than always talking negatively about it. And then one thing which may be well linked to that is also through that nudging, also embed responsible behavior frameworks into booking platforms, arrival and on-site communication. So, but in order to do this, we would need DMOs, culture, natural site, mobility providers to actually really collaborate. We've been talking about collaboration, so this is actually really important in order to enhance visitor experience and preserve resident interests, as we were saying earlier.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Briefly, please.
Very briefly, I brought up the issue of what I consider to be the parasites in the industry, the cruise industry. The cruise industry. Basically, for example, taking Malta as an example, in Malta we have 4 million tourists, which luckily do not include cruise passengers because we made sure in our definition of a tourist in the tourism law, 1999, to exclude those people who come for less than 24 hours. Therefore, in addition to the 4 million, we get about almost close to 1 million cruise passengers a day who come here at 10 o'clock in the morning, leave at 6 and pretend to have seen the island and leave money behind. They don't. The contribution, the economic contribution of the cruise industry is minimal, it's marginal. Frankly, to give the Malta example, we get 3 billion euros of revenue from tourism every year. The income from the cruise industry is less than 80 million. Now, shall we throw away that? I think if we do a cost-benefit analysis of the cruise industry in Malta, we will realize that thank you, but no thank you.
Thank you, Alfred, and I'm sure there will be comments, reactions to that statement about a particular aspect of the industry here. Good, so we conclude that round of interventions and we move straight away to the third and final question, governance. What solutions to governance and whole of government approaches? How do we address policies that necessarily cut across ministries, laterally, horizontally, but also at the same time vertically? How do we verticalize not the industry this time, but the policies regarding the industry. 10 minutes starting now.
الشمس طالع من طرف تمام اردم مالي ما يسبتشات من طرف الدنيا من قلب صحاب البوت مشكلة قلب الناتورة فيوري سجار الشمس حضورة عينيك لا ومملية دموع أفصل ديا بشني الروح دان الجمال نلبسو لبسة لتقعدنا فلنكين دان اسكت زفات عريق ودان الوقت البوت من كل شو من كل حد قلبي صحاب زفات عريق زفات عريق عينينا التقوا في نص الطريق انطينا اللي كنا في النص الامكان البوث متمر وتاشي كولتورا حاجة واحدة مع الناتورا اسكت بيرفكت شين ماكينات وهيك مودريت وفي كل سوجيت الفانتاسيا والإلوزيون الانكويت مويش السولوزيوني دان الجمال نلبسو لبسة لتقعدنا في الامكان دان اسكت زفات عريق ودان الوقت البوث من كل شو من كل حد قلبي صحاب زفات عريق زفات عريق في المهد العرض فوق down للمية عداو الشهور وعداو اليوم زعمضان البراف وصدار هفنانيس فوق بحر بلو يعج بلايس عسيت لروحي تحليني فتيت سفيت شاي دنيا راف ارتبيت من عارف عملتي فوصفنا شكل حياة العينونة وما عارف يمكن 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 kont għamel bħal sietna n-niet meta twelli domma kellix biex tfittxaw fartu raj ħabtu l-bib dawn ġew minn fuq ma għaxu ma' nies mhux ġew maqful la bħal xi qattil ġejthom biex nitla' minn ħafna nkwiet għajat tal-għajnuna u ma niflimkien. Sbajja l-fuq penġi zewġ tuċċuf ismawi l-istelna għad penġijiet kometi żgħar galassi kbar li jiġru daqs ir-riħ spiċċajna niġru fuq l-irmijiet għal-dinja żejra fost l-infinit dinja fraġi mingħajr ftit immorru d-dara xagħtu żin il-lejl u dana huwa twil u hekk nintilfu f'dawl il-wien ħaġa waħda jien u int nies f'idejna nkawdu żmien nollu jdejna l fuq flimkien. Sema skont li jibdel il-kulur għal-jum ġdid Iswed għal-marru jisir u qegħdin hawn inkantaw u nieħdu ftit pjaċir Ejja nagħmlu dal-lejbir dinja żejra fost l-infinit dinja fraġli mingħajr ftit immorru d-dara xagħtu l-ħin il-lejl u dana huwa twil u hekk nintilfu f'dal il-wien ħaġa waħda jien u int b'nies f'idejna nkawdu żmien nollu jdejna l-fuq flimkien.
So can you please type your comment for the third and final challenge? What solutions have you proposed around your table? Let me start reading. Manage the tourism flow by national and transfrontier initiative, like sustainable national project and the Ticino ticket, the Ticino region proposal in Switzerland, something to look up. Demand management organizations, including all stakeholders, hospitality, transport, CCIs. What's CCI? Creative, thank you, cultural, creative industries. Policymakers, accessibility, resilience, open line communication, data, digital transition, public-private partnerships, smart destinations. Tourism departments need to have good knowledge of other relevant departments' ministries, co-create and engage with them for joint solutions, and preferably give them the solution. Don't just throw the problem into their lap. They would love that. Build trust. Hierarchy matters, and faces sometimes matter too, right? Who the politician is, who the minister is, sometimes matters too. Placing cross-cutting issues such as tourism with a high-level mandate, including mandatory interministerial mechanism or agency. Improving fluidity at cabinet level. Raise the importance of tourism in the political agenda, as it's a trans-sector industry. It's split between different ministries, jointly with the private sector. Thank you. Anything else? This is 5 for now. In the meantime, let me start doing the rounds for any additional comments. Anything from this table? Anything from the table behind? All right, I'll be reading that soon. Anything from the table over there? No. Anything from this table? You're getting tired now. Anything from that table?
Yes.
Please.
Well, we added the word smart destinations there at the end.
Yes.
Now, I know that UNWTO before had an initiative of smart destinations.
Yes.
Now it seems that this is not active anymore, but I think it's a very high time that we can bring this back. And also
Yes.
the Smart Tourism Initiative of the European Commission now.
Okay.
The title is
That's a good point. And sometimes the same word means different things in different times. So when we talk smart today, probably it involves artificial intelligence, it involves virtual reality, right?
It
involves the use of big data.
It includes data, it includes accessibility, digitalization, cultural heritage, creativity, and sustainability. And now, of course, we need to add resilience.
Excellent. Thank you for that. In the meantime, let me read the comment that has just come up on screen. Create permanent interdepartmental tourism flow task forces.
Yes.
At destination or regional level with decision-making authority. Embed tourism flow considerations into urban plans, mobility strategies, etc. Thank you for that. Anything from this table? Anything from that table over there? No.
There
Okay.
was one last point was
Yes,
that
please.
on the specificity of the conversation that are taking place here in the Maltese table, one of the things that was highlighted, how important is to actually have the shift and the transition from strategic planning into implementation, because very often we're very good at planning and coming together to decide things, have consultation, but then when it comes to implementing the decision, there is a disconnect, particularly
Yes.
as tourism management intersects with housing, transport, environment, culture, spatial planning, and regional development.
Thank you so much. And of course, in a small country like ours as well, the whole issue of micromanagement may come into it as well. You may have politicians who are really very, very interested, not just in policy making, but even in making sure that the operationalization of that policy unfolds in a certain way. Thank you. By the way, I asked Mr. Camilleri from Jobs Plus, which is the National Labour Training Agency and Employment Agency, for some statistics about employment in tourism in Malta. And the direct employment of tourism in Malta is about 17% of the labor force. It translates into about 50-something thousand employees, including self-employed. Compare that to the contribution to GDP, which is about from 11 to 15%. So labor productivity on average is lower, is below average that of the whole economy in the tourism sector, which I think is typical in most countries. Right, so thank you for that. 3 interesting rounds. I have one final question that I am obliged to ask you. And this goes back to the first set of 8 dimensions, the 8 challenges that were proposed to you. Did you notice anything missing? Was there any particular challenge that, in your opinion, should have been added to that 8 or should have been given priority? Once again, Mentimeter, and just type a couple of words. You don't need to write paragraphs now. A word or 2 should suffice. This is the final round. And you have 2 minutes, starting now. Right, so we have climate change, which has been highlighted already. It's on the board now. We also have the skills challenge. I don't think we spoke a lot about education and training in this session. Those kinds of specialist bottlenecks that you need in particular aspects of the industry. Climate change again, climate change again, climate change again. Okay, I think you've made the point. Enforcement of regulations, yes, you may have most beautiful regulations on the planet, but are they being enforced? Who is responsible for enforcement? Sometimes you get a sense that there are so many players, so many units, agencies responsible for the same thing, you would think it's deliberate because nobody owns the problem. It's easy to change, it's easy to shift responsibility. Talent recruitment, so that goes back to skills as well, the HR dimension, accessible tourism. It's a growing demographic as well, you know, senior citizens, people with disabilities, people who have mobility handicaps in particular. How do we expand that sector? These are usually people who have a lot of money and they need to spend them before they die, right? Thank you for that. Educational projects on culture and natural heritage, more education, crisis management, tourism labor shortages, and last but not least, strategic foresight. Thank you so much. So there, I don't want to hog the mic anymore. I think I've tried to do as good a job as I could. Thank you for your collaboration, and it's now my pleasure to call to the podium the people who will wrap up the session. Professor Jeffrey Lipman, President of SUNEX Malta, former Executive Director, IATA, former Assistant Secretary General, UN Tourism, and Ms. Sander Carvao, Director of Market Intelligence, Policies and Competitiveness with UN Tourism. Please join me on stage. And you have a choice. You can stand up, use the mic, or sit down, relax. It's up to you. You may want to put in some circulation in your legs. I gave you the choice. So it's been a very intensive morning, starting from the Minister and the Secretary General, etc. You've been patiently taking notes, I'm sure. So why don't you go ahead, Sandra, with your comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think the first thank you is to all of you who have been engaged in the discussions and in the tables. I hope it has been interactive as our table was. So thank you for that, and most importantly, that I do hope that you take some of those back home and they're useful for your own discussions. We ourselves are going to obviously take them through our own thinking and summarizing them, and hopefully also to make this a more structured discussion within UN Tourism. I think someone also mentioned it at some point. But I'm not the one to talk here. No, it's you, Jeffrey.
This will be new.
No, this will be new. So this time, I'll pass you mic if it doesn't work. So Jeffrey, looking into what happened all this morning since the outset, 3 ideas to take home. And what did we miss in this discussion?
That's a really easy task, Sandra. The first thing I want to comment on is when Tom Jenkins told a story about Warren Buffett and his definition of marriage being, for happy marriage being low expectation, what he failed to add is that Warren Buffett lives in Omaha, Nebraska, and his wife lives in Los Angeles. Think about that. I was given this task by my friend Leslie Vella. I think he was mad at me at the time. And he said, there's going to be an entire morning of discussion, and then you're going to have 3 minutes at the end to summarize it. So I did what any rational person would do. I asked AI. And I said, if you're going to go to a conference and here are the speakers, what are the likely points that they're going to summarize, that they're going to come up with? And I listed the names of the speakers, and I asked AI, give me the results of this session. And I'm going to share with you what AI said to me, because I think it's quite instructive. The first point it came up with was governance. And it said, this is a massive subject, you know, you cover it in a word, but it's cities, countries, regions, local communities, and everyone has a different reality. So part of our challenge is to try to find a solution around the concept of governance in like a morning for Europe in a completely complicated and diverse world. That was the first thing. The second point it came up with was resident well-being. And I think we've covered that all over the place. That is a critical issue. If you want to balance it, as the Deputy Prime Minister said this morning, you need to talk to the local residents. And of course, people will say we are surveying residents. But then what are they doing with the results of the survey? How are they correlating it with the other data that they are supposed to deliver? And how do they implement it? It's one thing to have it as data. It's another question to how do you implement it? And what I'm saying here is this is a really complicated subject. And then people say, well, there's no one size fits all. And then you have a discussion and a debate where you try to find one size that fits all. And it doesn't work. The third point it came up with, and these are my words, global strategies. You have global policies, strategies from the EU Commissioner across Europe, from UN Tourism, but then they have to be implemented at the local level. That's what global is all about. And mostly we don't have mechanisms in tourism that does that at all. Then, I think this is one of my points, I sat here the whole morning, and every time I go on my phone, it tells me the solution to our future is going to come through AI. And I think I heard it mentioned once. And maybe we're just the wrong generation for finding these solutions, because the next generation, I really suspect, would say, you apply AI to demand management and you ask it the same sort of idiot's questions that I asked last evening of my computer. Short-term rentals, that's another one. And that's one that David O'Brien or Michael O'Leary has been going on about as being one of the problems of balancing supply and demand. that short-term rentals are creating irritants. They're creating irritants for residents, and this leads to the protests and the anti-tourism sentiments which are out there. Infrastructure shortfall, that was another one that came up with. Everybody knows what the statistics are for this year for numbers of tourists and how it's going to grow next year. And if it doesn't grow next year, it's a failure. And that's fair enough. I think the Deputy Prime Minister said it quite clearly. We need to have some form of well-managed growth. But if you don't have the infrastructure in place, you're going to get congestion on the ground. Your airports are going to be crowded. Everybody in the room knows that airports are a horrible experience, and increasingly so. Have we looked at airports? Well, David O'Brien mentioned that again. And they are becoming a bottleneck in the system. You go through one side and you're in a prison. As you go through security, you come out of it and you're in a department store. And then you have to walk 3 miles to get to your flight. And of course, I had climate identified. Many people have said it. The tourism dimension that we're talking about here is not going to be the same one in 3 years' time. It's going to be hotter. There's going to be more droughts. There's going to be sea level rises. And when we're thinking about solutions, how much are any of us factoring those issues in? And I think that's about all of the points that I came, or that AI came up with for me last night. I think managing expectations is probably the most fundamental thing. We started off with Jafar explaining what T-Forum is and how you need to create this two-way street between industry and academia and industry. I never heard it mentioned once in any of the comments that came up. How are these so-called solutions to the challenges, how will they be affected by industry? I ran in the 1990s WTTC. I was the first president. I ran it for 10 years. They have a totally different mindset. Jafar talks about putting, 300 journals with 1,000 words of each. If you can't put it on one page of paper for industry, it's never going to get to the top management, so they're never going to make a decision on it. These are the hard realities of life. And I think I will finish with a story. If there are any Irish people in here, I apologize. But there was a guy in Ireland, and he was driving around, and he got lost. So he came to a cottage, and there was a guy in the garden gardening. He said, "Excuse me, sir, what's the best way to get to Dublin from here?" And the guy looked at him and said, "Well, if I was you, I don't think I'd be starting from here." Think about that. We are looking for challenges and solutions, and I'm sorry to say this because it was an interesting, fun session of a huge dimension in half a day with a quite complicated program, and the expectation is incredibly high. But it was fun.
Thank you, Jeffrey. The homework is on that side now. Thank you very much for everyone, and thank you, Jeffrey. It's been a pleasure.
It was a pleasure, Sandra.
And now I give back the floor to Cordula to just give us some closing remarks before we depart, and thank you again.
Thank you so much, Professor Lippmann. Always a pleasure being with you and listening to you. Very good. And Sandra, thank you. Thank you for doing the concluding remarks. Excellencies, distinguished guests, speakers and panelists, colleagues and partners, as we conclude this important conference on driving tourism towards the future we want,
a dialogue on policies to balance growth, people and planet. Allow me to express my sincere appreciation to all those who contributed to the discussions today. I wish to thank our distinguished speakers and panelists, participants and partners for all the knowledge, commitment and spirit of co-creation that you brought to this conference. It is an important piece of collaboration across the sectors and the disciplines and institutions. On behalf of UN Tourism, also our heartfelt gratitude to the government of Malta and the Malta Tourism Authority for their warm hospitality and for organizing this conference. And also our deep appreciation to the T-Forum and Professor Jafar Jafari for the valuable collaboration and contribution. It's a very timely and very important conversation. As Professor Lippmann just said, only half a day on a highly complex topic. We in UN Tourism obviously have this in our program of work. We will keep working on this. We will make sure that the findings and the hard work that you put into today's discussions and the co-creation of solutions, we will make good use of this. We will publish that also on our website. We make a small report out of this that we will then share with you. And we will keep working with this outcome. So your solutions that you found today, the contributions, we will proactively use in our way ahead. There's more to come in this. So it is about stronger destination stewardship. Residents must be at the core of anything we do. We must measure that what truly matters, and we need to diversify further. But most importantly, we need to stick together, we need to collaborate, we need to co-create, we need to share our experiences in this highly complex field, and very important, we need to work more with the academia because they might have solutions that we are not aware of. So this is also the bridge that we need to build, and this is work ahead of us. Again, many, many thanks for being with us today. I hope you found it as useful and exciting as we did on our side. And thank you, safe travels, and all the best. In the meantime, there's lunch served outside, and with this, we are coming to an end of the official program of our 72nd Commission for Europe meeting. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
فيوري السجار الشمس حضورها عينيك لا ومملية دموع أفصل ايديا باش نهو الروح دان الجمال نلبسو لبسة لتقل